Today we're going to be learning Ketubot Daf Nun Bet. This is the Daf for Shabbat. We're going to start right at the bottom of Nun Aleph Amud Bet at Amar Abaye, or really at the words of Kohenet Hadrinach Lebinginatech. We learned in the Mishnah yesterday that there's two different versions of what's written in the Ketubah. For a woman married to a Yisrael, it says, if you become intishtabai, if you get taken into captivity, afarkinach v'otvinach I will return you to be my wife. But in a Kohenet, a woman married to a Kohen, he says, Ahadrinach lemedinatech. I will redeem you and I will return you to your state, to your country, to your region. Okay, because he is not allowed to marry her, because there's a concern that she was raped in the interim. So Amar Abaye basically wants to derive from here, since the language in the Ketubah of a woman married to a Kohen is different from a woman married to Israel, he wants to distinguish now between two cases. He says, Almana leKohen Gadol, let's say it was a widow married to a Kohen Gadol, a high priest, Chayav liftota, he needs to redeem her. Shani koreba, because it still fits in with the words, Ubikohenet adrinach lemedinatech, even though he can't remarry her for two reasons, right? Number one, because she was potentially raped, but number two, because she anyway is not allowed to marry him, because a Kohen Gadol, a high priest, can't marry a widow. So it still fits in with the words, it's not as clear until you see the contrast. The next case is, mamzeret unetina Yisrael. But if a woman was a mamzeret or a netina, who is forbidden to marry a regular Yisrael, but she did anyway. Now we've learned already, there's a machloket about this. Rabbi Akiva holds there is no betrothal, the marriage, none of it applies, but we don't hold that way. And in fact, it's a valid marriage. But if it's a valid marriage, right, he's not allowed to, but he still owes her ketubah, and all of that applies. In that ketubah, what's written? It's written, the basic, since he's not a Kohen, he's just a regular Yisrael, it says in that ketubah, if you get taken into captivity, I will redeem you and return you to be my wife. Now, in this case, he's not allowed to bring her back to be his wife. And therefore, eno chayav liftota, he's not actually responsible to redeem her. She'ein ani koreba ve'otvinach lil into. Because the words of the ketubah are just not true. He can't say, if you get taken into captivity, I'll redeem you and I'll bring you back to be my wife. So therefore, again, let's just be clear. Abaye distinguishes between two cases. If you're married to a Kohen and the language in your ketubah is, and it's all because of the language written in the ketubah, I will return you to your country, and it doesn't matter whether you're forbidden to marry him or not, because in any case, he's not planning to remarry you. So he is obligated to redeem you. But he's not obligated to redeem you if the wording of the ketubah is, I will return you to be my wife, and he actually can't return you to be the wife because it's forbidden for a regular person, a Yisrael, to marry, or even a Kohen, anybody, to marry a mamzer. So the issue is, if he's a Kohen and it says, I'll return you to your country, then actually you would have to fulfill it. But if he's not a Kohen and the language is a regular language, then it can't be fulfilled, and therefore he's not responsible to redeem her. Rava Amal, kol she'isur shviya gorem la, chayav liftota. Isur davar acher gorem la, eno chayav liftota. Rava says, I don't know what distinction you're making. If the whole issue is that he can't be married to her for some other reason, davar acher, like mamzer, nitin, or right, she's a mamzeret, she's a netina, or he's a Kohen and she's a widow, or he's a high priest and she's a widow, or she's a divorcee and he's a regular Kohen, then any of those situations, he is not responsible to redeem her. It has nothing to do with the language in the ketubah. The point is, even a Kohen, even if the language in the ketubah is, I will return you to your country, it's only that he's only obligated to redeem her when the problem lies in the redemption, the fact that she was taken into captivity. For a Kohen, a regular Kohen who's married to a regular woman who is allowed to be married to, he is obligated to redeem her and bring her back to her country, no matter, right? Because even though he can't remarry her, because it's the redemption, the captivity that caused the issue. But if it's that he can't marry her for some other reason, and he wasn't supposed to marry her in the first place, then he's actually not obligated to redeem her. Doesn't matter what it says in the Ketubot. It doesn't matter if the language is, I'll return you to your country and not I'm going to remarry you. It's still a problem, okay? Or again, it's not a problem. It's just he is not obligated to redeem her. Okay, so Rava basically doesn't distinguish between the mamzer and the Kohen Gadol, or a regular priest. He says all those people do not have to redeem their wives because they weren't really, in fact, supposed to be married in the first place. So now they want to say, Lema Ketanai. Let's suggest that this is a machloket between Tanaim. Okay, first, we're going to read a machloket Tanaim, then we're going to establish that the case must be relating to this. So first, let's read the Braita. Hamadir et ishto v'nishbeit. Somebody swears that they will not benefit from their wife. Now, if you swear benefit from your wife, you're not allowed to be married to her because remember, the man has obligations to have sexual relations with his wife. If he swears, I will not benefit from you at all, then he can't. So if he basically forbids his wife to be, to get, it's actually, note low, he forbids his wife, low, just trying to think if it's forbidden to him, for him to benefit from her to benefit from him. Let me just double check that. Okay, it's she doesn't receive any benefit from him. Okay, he says, I will not allow you to benefit from me at all. He basically can't stay married to her. So what if he does that? And then she gets taken into captivity. Okay, we'll talk about, is it necessarily in that order? But right now it sounds like he takes a vow that she will not benefit from him. And then she gets taken into captivity. So at this point, he can't take her back to be his wife. So Rabbi Eliezer Omer, podev noten la ketubata. He still needs to redeem her, and then he needs to basically divorce her and give her ketubah money. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, noten la ketubata ve'eno podeh. He doesn't have any responsibility whatsoever to redeem her. He just has to divorce her, give her a ketubah, and she can redeem herself with that money if she wants. So Amar Rabbi Natan, before we get to explain this, Rabbi Natan says, Sha'alti et Sumchus. I asked Sumchus the following question about Rabbi Yehoshua's opinion. Kish'amar Rabbi Yoshua noten la ketubata ve'eno podeh. Is it, when he said he divorces her and he doesn't have to redeem her, is it kishehidira ulevasof nishbeit? Here we get into the order. Is it when he first vowed against her and then he redeemed? She was taken into captivity. Oh, b'shenishbeit ulevasof dira. Or is it the case where she was taken into captivity and then he forbade her to benefit from him? Va'amar li, and Sumchus said to me, Lo shamati. I didn't hear whether he said it in this case or that. However, nir'in dvarim shedira ulevasof nishbeit. It seems logical to me that the case must be where he vowed that she not benefit from him, and then she got taken into captivity. Why? Because if you say it's a case where she was taken into captivity and then he swore off, well, you can already maybe see the problem. He could basically get himself out of redeeming his wife. Imagine his wife gets taken into captivity. And then he says, oh, you know what? If I swear that she doesn't get, I make a vow that she won't benefit from me at all, what will happen? Oh, I'll be off the hook. Then I won't need to redeem her. So basically that would cause a situation where men might cause this situation to happen. So therefore it must be, he must have sworn beforehand, taken this vow, and then, right, I keep saying swear, but it's really vow, right? There's a difference between shavua, which is a swear, and neder, which is a vow. Here we're talking about a vow. All those differences we'll get to. We're getting to Masechet Nedarim, so we'll talk about it. But sorry that I'm using the wrong language. It's vowing. So it must be a case where he took the vow first and then she got taken into captivity. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. Any husband could just get out of redeeming his wife by doing the following, by that following solution, by basically making a vow after she gets taken into captivity. Okay, that was an aside. Now let's get back to the main point. Now they say, this case must be, my love, is it not? Bimadil eshet kohen kamiflage. It must be, we're going to have three ways to explain this bright. First, we're going to say it relates directly to our case. Here's the suggestion. It must be where he made the vow when he was a kohen married to another woman. Okay, now what? Then, okay, if we're going to assume it was an eshet kohen, it was the wife of a kohen, who again, once she gets taken into captivity, she can no longer go back to him. And then again, what's the issue? The language of the wife of a Kohen is, because of that, I will return you to your country. Now remember, this woman, because she's sworn, right, he already took a vow that she can't benefit, they can't be married anymore. So therefore, it must be that we're talking about a woman whose ketubah doesn't say, I will return you to be my wife, because this woman can't be returned to be the wife. And then the debate fits in exactly with the two opinions. Abaye d'amar k'Rabbi Eliezer. So Abaye, who said, in this case, he has to redeem her. In the case of a Kohen Gadol to a widow, he has to redeem her because it still fits with the language of the ketubah. I'll return you to your country. So therefore, Rabbi Eliezer, Abaye must hold like Rabbi Eliezer. Remember, Abaye is an Amora. Rabbi Eliezer is earlier than him. So he must hold like Rabbi Eliezer, the Tana, who says he's obligated to redeem her. The Rava d'amar Rabbi Yoshua, and Rabbi Yoshua, who basically says, no, he doesn't have to redeem her. He must be saying, right? Rava must be holding like him. When Rava said, it doesn't matter if it says, I'll return you to your country, it's still anyone who's not allowed to be married to the woman is not obligated to redeem her. Kohen, Mamzer, it doesn't make a difference. So seems to line up very nicely. To which the Gemara says, no, that's not the debate between them. What must be the case? Kigon shenadra ihi v'kiem lahu. The debate has nothing to do with this Abaye Rava debate. The debate has to do with the case where she took the vow. Okay, and then we're talking about she takes the vow, and what's the issue? He let the vow go through, meaning he approved it. Remember, the husband can always annul her vows. He has a certain short time frame in which he can do it. If he doesn't do it, he basically said, okay, I'll let your vow go through. Now, if she said, I swear I'm not going to benefit, I take a vow that I'm not going to benefit from you, and then he said, I approve it, or didn't disapprove it, then Rabbi Eliezer Savar, Hu Natan Etzba Ben Shineha. Who's really responsible? It's a good question. Who's responsible for this vow going through and for the fact that they need to get divorced? Well, it's two of them. She did it. He didn't undo it. So Rabbi Eliezer, so now we're going to have the debate is who's more responsible. So Rabbi Eliezer says he put a finger between her teeth. Okay, that's what it means, the literal translation. What it means is he approved it, right? She tried to do something crazy, right? By vowing, I'm not going to benefit from you. And he made it happen, right? Because he could have stopped it, so it's his doing. Because of that, and now it's a little bit tricky, the commentaries struggle a little bit with why this is connected. But because he's responsible for that, he then needs to redeem her. In other words, he can't say, oh, well, you're on your own, okay? And he helped this vow go along, and therefore, if she gets taken into captivity, he's still responsible for her. Rabbi Yoshua Saval, it's her fault. She did this whole thing and basically disconnected herself from her husband. So therefore, when it comes time to redeem her, well, he no longer needs to redeem her because basically she's going to get divorced any day and he's no longer responsible. So again, the exact connection is a good question, what this has to do with. So now the Gemara says, wait a minute. We have a problem with this understanding of Rabbi Yoshua. Because what did Rabbi Yoshua say? Let's go back to the words. We've been focusing on he doesn't need to redeem her. But look at what Rabbi Yoshua says. It's in the 7th or 8th line. Noten la ktubata ve'eno podeh. He gives her ketubah, and he doesn't need to redeem her. Meaning, right, he divorces her, she gets her ketubah money, and he's no longer responsible to redeem her. Well, if she's the one who destroyed the marriage by vowing that she's not going to benefit from him, she doesn't even deserve her ketubah. Okay? She kind of broke the contract. So she doesn't get a ketubah, vitu. And furthermore, remember the continuation of the Braita. Amar Rabbi Natan, sha'alti et sumchus, k'shamar Rabbi Yoshua noten la ketubata ve'eno podeh, kishi dira u'levasof nishpet, o b'shenishpet u'levasof dira. Remember, he asked, what's the order? Where the vow came first or the captivity came first? V'amar li lo shamati, and he answered me, I didn't hear. I don't have a tradition about it, but I denadra ihi, mali hidira u'levasof nishpet, mali nishpet u'levasof dira. Remember, the whole thing was, this could be a good solution. It obviously must not be that the husband takes the vow after she goes into captivity, because that would be a good way. We give the husband a whole solution for how to avoid redeeming his wife. And we obviously don't want that to happen. So if that's the case, this statement of Rabbi Natan makes no sense, because if she took the vow, what's the difference if she took the vow before she was taken into captivity or she took the vow after captivity? The whole problem was the husband deceiving the wife and trying to avoid redeeming her. In this case, she's the one who took the vow. So it doesn't fit in with the Braita at all. So therefore, second explanation falls as well. So they say, no, it must be he took the vow, and Abaye mitaretz l'tamei v'Rava mitaretz l'tamei. And now we're going to explain each reading, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, each in two different ways. So in the end, we're going to have actually four explanations of the Braita. I said three, because this is the third attempt to resolve the Braita. But within the third example, we're going to have the third explanation, we're going to have two different options. One is the way Abaye is going to read it to fit with his approach, and one is the way Rava is going to read it to fit with his approach. Let's just quickly review Abaye and Rava. Abaye said we're going to distinguish between a Kohen's Ketubah, where it says I'm returning you to the state or to the country or to the area, as opposed to a regular Yisrael whose Ketubah says I'm returning you to be my wife. So when he's returning to be the wife, if they're not allowed to be married, well then no can do, right? When it says I'll return you to your country, any Kohen's Ketubah, even if the Kohen was forbidden to the woman in the beginning, he would still have to redeem her. And Rava says we don't distinguish. None of them need to redeem their wives. So now we're going to explain each one. So Abaye mitaretz l'tamei v'Rava mitaretz l'tamei. Each one is going to explain according to his interpretation. Abaye mitaretz l'tamei. Almana lekohen gadol kule amal pligi dechayav lifdota. A widow to the Kohen Gadol. Everyone agrees, and this is Abaye, that he would have to redeem her, because again, the Ketubah language still fits. Mamzeret unetina liYisrael kule amal pligi de'eno chayav lifdota. And if it was a mamzeret or a netina to a regular Yisrael, and the language said, I'll return you to be my wife, everyone's going to agree that you don't need to redeem. Meaning, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua aren't referring to those two cases. So, which case is it referring to? And one more case, no, they were all going to agree to. Madir Eshet Kohen. Now, if it was the wife of a Kohen, and again, to Abaye, it's all, what's critical is the language of the Ketubah. So if it's the wife of a Kohen, and he said, right, he vowed, you will not get any benefit from me. So again, that's no different than the widow to the Kohen Gadol. If we're now going to basically distinguish between a man who vows that his wife won't benefit from him, is going to be a different case if he's a Kohen or if he's not a Kohen. Because if he's a Kohen, his Ketubah already says, I promise to redeem you and return you to the country, meaning not to remarry you. So if he vowed that his wife will not benefit from him, then he still has to redeem her according to everybody. There's no debate about that. So what are we left with? The debate is, Ki pligi b'madir eshet Yisrael. The only case where they debate this is if she's married to a regular Jew, a Yisrael. The Ketubah says, I promise to redeem you and return you to be my wife. Then we have this debate. So again, Rabbi Eliezer says he has to redeem her. Rabbi Yoshua says he doesn't. So Rabbi Yoshua would be the more logical explanation. So why Rabbi Eliezer? Well, here comes the debate. Rabbi Eliezer, azil batar me'ikara. He goes based on the original. Okay, let's talk about the timeline. We're going to have a timeline here. And Rabbi Yoshua is going to go after the sof, the end. So we start with, he promises, I'm going to redeem you, right? In the Ketubah, and I'll redeem you to be my wife. Then he says, I vow you're not going to benefit from me. Then she gets taken into captivity. Then comes the moment where he's supposed to redeem her. So Rabbi Eliezer is going to say, I go by the first moment. The first moment was he committed that he's going to redeem her so she can be his wife. And at that point, she can still be his wife. The fact that later something else happens, it doesn't matter. We go by, right, with the Mamzeret and Netina, for example, or the Almanada, the Kohen Gadol, or any Kohen for that matter, right? When the wife gets taken into captivity, or even before that, right, he's not allowed to remarry her. So then it wouldn't work, right? He wouldn't be, well, the truth is, right, sorry. If it's a Kohen, then it would work because it says, I'll bring you back to my country. But if it was a Mamzeret Netina, then it wouldn't work, right? Because from the moment he promises her, she can't actually be his wife. But in this case, she could have been his wife at that point. It's only because later he made this vow, then she's forbidden. So Rabbi Eliezer says we hold by the beginning. And as we said before, right? The Rabbi Yoshua Azil Batar Basof, he goes by the moment now when it's time to redeem her. Can he stay married to her? No, he can't, because he vowed that she can't benefit from him. So since right now they can't get remarried, therefore it's off, right? He's not responsible. Rava mitaretz l'tabe. Rava's reading is, now remember Rava's reading. Rava's reading is mamzeret or netina, or right, anyone, let's just read his language again. Kol she'isur shivya gorem la chayav liflota. If it's because her status changed on account of her being taken into captivity, then he has to redeem her. But if isur davar achel, whether it's almanah kohen gadol or a mamzeret or a netina, then he's not obligated to redeem her at all. So how does Rabba mitaretz? Almanah kohen gadol, mamzeret or netina l'Yisrael, the two cases we just said. Everyone agrees that he doesn't need to redeem her. Ki pligi, what's the machloket here? Bim madil, it's a case of, now remember, Rava doesn't care what the language of your ketubah says. It's just a matter of, are you allowed to marry her or you are not allowed to marry her? So even the Kohen Gadol, whose ketubah says, I'm going to return you to come back to the country, but not to be my wife, still, he wouldn't have to redeem his wife if it was a forbidden marriage. So now, this is all going to be a forbidden marriage. Ki pligi bim madil bein eshet kohen bein eshet Yisrael. It doesn't matter because, again, he doesn't care what the language of ketubah says. Whether he's a kohen, whether he's a Yisrael, it doesn't matter. But again, what's the debate? Just like Abaye said, Rabbi Eliezer azal batar me'ikara. We go by the beginning. Well, again, this wasn't a kohen to a divorcee or a kohen gadol to an almanah. This was a kohen to a woman he was allowed to be married to. So since originally they were able to be married, even though later he ended up vowing not to benefit from her, and now they're forbidden, doesn't matter. We go by the beginning at the moment he wrote the ketubah. And at that point, it was a marriage that theoretically could have been fulfilled forever, could have stayed like that. And therefore, he's obligated to redeem her. Rabbi Yoshua Azil Batar Basof, he goes by what it is right now. Right now, it's an issue. Okay. Okay. So therefore, we're now going to say that, right, we have different ways of understanding this debate. And in the end, we tried to say, this is a Tannaitic debate, the same debate we were having before. And the answer is, no, it's not. Okay, because each Rava and Abaye can each explain this machloket according to their reading. Nishbet chayav liftota. Okay, now we go back to the language of the Mishnah. If she gets taken into captivity, he needs to redeem her. Tanu Rabbanan. Nishbet b'chayei ba'ala, v'achar kach meit ba'ala. What if, this is the classic what if questions, what if she gets taken into captivity when her husband's still alive? So he's obligated to redeem her, but then he dies. What about his heirs? Do they have to redeem her as well? So according to this Braita, he kir ba ba'ala, if he knew, now this is very interesting to think about why this is, but it all is based on if he knew she was taken into captivity. Okay, it's not a matter of what happened on the timeline, or it is a matter of the timeline, but not the timeline of was it that she was taken into captivity before he died or after. It was a matter of did he know before he died that she was? It seems like, which is very interesting, that the obligation for him to redeem her is only once he knows, right? There's no obligation to redeem her before he even knows that she was taken into captivity. So let's say she gets taken into captivity and he dies 10 minutes later and never heard that she was taken into captivity. So the law would be different. So let's read it. He kir ba'ala, if he knew, then he became obligated when he knew. Okay, again, this is an interesting thing. I don't know why this is, but the obligation kicks in when he knows. And therefore, Yorshin chayav l'tota. So the heirs inherit his responsibilities. Lo ikir ba'ala, but if not, ena Yorshin chayav l'tota. He didn't find out till, right, meaning nobody knew she was taken into captivity until, or he didn't know, and then he died. So the Yorshim don't have to, the heirs don't have to redeem her. He wanted to hold like this Braita and basically not obligate the children to redeem her. Amar le Rav, Hachi Amar Chavivi, Leitil Chataki Amatnita. The halacha, he wanted to force the inheritors to redeem her because the husband already knew before he died. So now, Amarle Rav said to him, Hachi Amar Chavivi, my uncle said, which is Rabbi Chia, Leit Hilchataki Amanita, we don't hold by this Braita. Elaki Hadatanya, we hold by a different Braita. Nishpeit Lachar Mitat Ba'ala, if she gets taken into captivity after her husband dies, Eina Yitomim Chayav Liptota, Chayvim Liptota, they don't need to redeem her. This is after his death. Below Od Ella, but not only that, Afilu Nishpeit B'Chayei Ba'ala V'Achar Kach Mei Ba'ala, even if she's taken into captivity when he's alive, and then he dies, Eina Yitomim Chayavim Liptota, why not? She'ena Nikorei Ba V'Ot V'Nach Le'intu. So it goes back to the language of the Ketubot, and I'll return you to be my wife. He can't return her to be the wife if he's dead. So therefore, according to Rav, we hold by a different Braita that basically says those who inherit are not obligated to redeem her. Tanu Rabbanit Nishbet. Okay, now we're going to get into a whole. Then we'll get to the sugya when we get to Gitin about this concern about redeeming people who for more money. Okay, there's this issue. We don't redeem captives for way more than their value because we're worried that it's one of these tikkun olam issues. We're worried that it will encourage people to take the Gentiles, it was at the time, to take people into captivity because they see that they can get a lot of money. So Tanu Rabbanan, Nishbet v'hayu mevakshim mimena ad asara b'dameha. If they're asking for more than 10 times the amount of her value, Pam Rishona Poda, Mikam Va'elach, Ratza Podeh, Pam Rishona, the first time, he needs to redeem her. But if they take her a second time, Mikam Va'elach, Ratza Podeh, Ratzaino Podeh. After that, if he wants to, he can, but he doesn't have to. This, by the way, totally contradicts the sugya in Gitin, which says you can't redeem someone. All sorts of interesting answers given. One of them is that Ishto Kagufo, it's like yourself. And of course, you would pay any amount of money to redeem yourself, and therefore you could. There's a bunch of resolutions to this contradiction, but I'll put it out there. Maybe when we get to Gitin, we'll talk about it more. And it's a bit of a long daf, and it's the Shabbat daf, so I don't want to spend too much time right now. But it's a big issue how this sugya works in with that one. So now they say, so again, according to the first opinion here, she gets taken into captivity. They're asking for more than 10 times her value. How do we assess her value? This again goes back to what the marketplace, what the value on the shuk is, right? What a slave woman would be sold for. They're asking 10 times the value of that, right? Or up to 10 times. He would have to redeem her, but only once. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, going out on the bet, Ein podin et hashvuyim yoter al kedei demehem mishum tikkun olam. So he now says you can't redeem them more than their value because of tikkun olam. This is what we saw. This is what comes up in Gitin. So he disagrees and says, no, you can't. Ha bichdei demehem podim. Now, here comes the question. There's a different question. It sounds like from Rosh ben Gamliel, bichdei demehem podim. But if they're asking for the value of the woman, you will redeem her no matter what. Whatever her value is, if they're asking the value itself, you'll be able to. Af al gav de pirkona yotel al ktubata. Even though her, let's say, maybe, they're assuming, right, that right now, the only thing you have to consider is it more than her value? But you don't have to consider, is it more than the value of her ketubah? So, af agav de pirkona yoter al ktubata, with that, right, it sounds like, even though it would be more than her ketubah. Urimini. So, in other words, we don't know the value of a woman in the shuk, but theoretically, it could be the value of the woman in the shuk is more than the value of her ketubah. And then you'd have to pay more. Well, that contradicts the following source. Urimini nishbet v'hayu mevakshim mimena ad asara b'ktubata. If they're asking more than 10 times her ketubah, pam rishona podeh, pam mikam va'elach ratza podeh ratzaino podeh. So Tanakama is like in the Braita that we saw, where the first time he'd have to do it anyway. The second time, it's up to him. Shimon ben Gamliel omer, im haya pirkona keneged ktubata podeh, im lav eino podeh. So here it sounds like the issue is the amount of the ketubah, and not 10 times her value, but 10 times the value of the ketubah. To which they answer, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel trei kule ile. It's basically whichever, right? It can't go over 10 times her ketubah or 10 times her value. It's the combination of the two. It's either or, basically, right? He doesn't have to spend any more than that. I'm sorry, any more, I just messed up, not 10 times, any more than the value of her ketubah, or any more the value of what her price is in the shuk. So if the price in the shuk is less, he doesn't have to spend any more than that. If the price of her ketubah is less, he doesn't have to spend any more than that. Okay, so again, we'll deal with this when we get to the Mishnah in, right? The Mishnah in Gittin about it, right? It definitely seems to be matching Rav Shimon Gamliel's position, but see that there's explanations there that try to resolve even Tanakama's opinion with the Mishnah there, and distinguishing between this case and a case of redeeming somebody else in the community where it's not your wife. Lakta chayav lerap, right? And the basic question is the laws about redeeming captives true for everybody, the one that comes up in Gittin, or are there exceptions to the rule? And there's a few cases where exceptions were made in different sugyot, and the commentaries try to resolve that. Lakta chayav lerapota. So if she gets sick, he has to, right? Remember, we have to take the money from the children for her doctor bills. Tanu Rabbanan. We saw that Rashi on the Mishnah had connected refuah to mizonot. Doctor bills are like food because, again, that's something you need for sustaining. So she gets fed, right, meaning from the nichsei yatomim, and if she needs refuah, harehi kemizonot. This is where Rashi got it from. Her doctor bills are like the food payments. By the way, I forgot to mention this in the last class, but when we talked about mizonot for the woman, and there's this whole debate about whether she can collect from the metaltalin or not, the Gaonim instituted that women can collect both of their ketubah money and mizonot from metaltalin. Okay, it's a very important Gaonic institution. They instituted that basically women, to make it easier for them to collect this money. That's just an important point to know. So now, she can basically get her money like mizonot, which would mean she could take doctor bills according to the Gaonic tradition, right? It would then mean, it seems like, also from metaltalin, from movable property. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer, רפואה שיש לה קצבה נתרפאת מכתובתה, שאין לה קצבה הרי היא כמזונות. This is very fascinating. And you'll see even more from the next story. If it's a set amount, then it comes from her ketubah, which is a set amount. But meaning they can deduct it from the ketubah amount. Whereas let's start with the second one. If she needs ongoing doctor bills, right? She needs regular treatments, and there's no set amount. So that becomes like mizono payment, which is, you're in constant need of food, you're in constant need of bills, right? And we don't know how much it'll be constant and ongoing. Then we treat it like mizono. But if there's like a surgery she needs and it's a one-time bill, that can come out of her, exactly where you draw this line is a good question, but that can come out of her ketubah payment, which means, again, there's the 200 zuz. Let's say it costs 50 zuzim for this surgery. So they take that off the ketubah money, and then they only owe her 150. And it doesn't come, you have to remember, a widow basically can, I'll repeat this many times because it's very important to understand. A widow can basically claim food payments until such time as, and we'll see this tomorrow in a little while, till such time that she starts looking for another husband, or she gets married, or, right, there's different times about when this will be, but, or she makes a claim, I want to get my ketubah money, then she gets her lump sum money, and she no longer gets food payments. But basically, for the woman, it's much smarter to keep getting paid food payments until such time that she can't anymore, right? Because let's say she's ready to get married, then she claims her lump sum and she's done with mizonot. So we're going to basically treat, right? It's much better for her to keep getting that monthly payment because it'll never end basically until it has to end. But as opposed to the lump sum payment, that's basically the end of it. So if it's a one-time payment, comes from her ketubah money. If it's a long-term thing, then it's mizonot. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Asu hakazat dam be'eretz Yisrael k'refuah she'en la kitzba. Because they would bloodlet at regular intervals, people bloodlet all the time. They thought it was a healthy thing to do. They took out blood. So they viewed that like refuah she'en la kitzba, that it has no limit, and therefore she can continue to get that from the mizonot. Okay, she gets that from, and doesn't come off her ketubah money. Now we get a crazy story. Kreve de Rabbi Yochanan havale itat abba. The relatives of Rabbi Yochanan, they had a woman who was the widow of their father. She needed she had doctor's bills every day. It was costing them a lot of money. They went to Rabbi Yochanan for advice. Amar lahu, you're going to be very shocked. Izilu kotsule midi la rofe. Go come up with a price from the doctor. Tell him to give you a price instead of paying you daily. Say, I'm going to give you a price for this treatment, a one-time payment. And then, whether they pay it over time, it doesn't matter, but it's a set price. And then you'll be able to deduct it from her ketubah. So that's very interesting in of itself, right? He advised his relatives how to basically avoid payments. And then what's more interesting is Rabbi Yochanan felt bad about this. And here comes a very big line. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, asinu atzmenu k'orchei dayanim. He said about himself, I can't believe I've made myself into a lawyer, basically. I can't believe I just gave this advice to my relatives, right? He felt awful about it. Rashi says, what's ke'orchei hadayanim? Ohev echad miba'alei hadinim umat'im zchuyotav l'dayan va'orech hadayanim l'zchuto. Orchei hadayanim are basically people, okay, the way it translates literally in Hebrew, in English is lawyers, but here what they're saying is, what does it mean, orech din? Okay, this is fascinating in terms of lawyers and people who claim lawyers, right, try to, on the one hand, lawyers bring justice. On the other hand, sometimes they're obviously always on the side of their client. So what do? They basically mat'im zchuyotav l'dayan. They bring all the zchuyot. They bring one side to the judge. They're orech the dayanim. They basically, what's the word? They manipulate the judges. Okay, and that's what I just did here. So they asked me, Kara my savar, levasaf my savar. Why was he helping them in the first place, and why did he feel bad about it eventually? In the beginning, he thought, well, you shouldn't ignore your relatives. Your relatives need help. You're supposed to help them. That's a pasuk. Okay, it's a pasuk from Yeshayahu. Adam chashuv shani. Then he realized, I'm an important person, and I shouldn't do that. Right? In other words, he realized, I'm setting a very bad example. And then people will do this in general, and that's not right. It's not a good example to be doing this kind of thing. Okay, it's a good question, like what particularly about it was a bad example, that someone's basically, right, that it seems like he felt bad, that he was basically twisting the law, really, to help his relatives. And also this poor woman who now is going to be stuck taking her doctor bills out of her ketubah and not getting what she deserved. It's very interesting. It's interesting to see Rabbi Yochanan felt bad about it, but it was really too late. I wonder what he did to resolve the situation. Doesn't look like he did anything. Okay, new Mishnah. We're continuing now in all sorts of things that we call t'na'ei ketubah, that are basically committed in the ketubah, even if you didn't write them. Lo katav labanin dichrin dihavu lechi minai inu yartin kesef ketubatech yetera chul kehen di'imachechem chayav shu t'nai beitim. This is the ketubah banin dichrin. Okay, your male children that are going to come from me, they will inherit your money of your ketubah more than their other brothers, meaning any sons I have from other wives. That, if you didn't write that, it doesn't matter. It's in your ketubah. It's there no matter what. Even if you're obligated to do that, even if you didn't write it. Similarly, Benan Nukvin, it's funny, Benam is sons, but Nikvin is Nikevot, your daughters, it means your children that are daughters, that will be born to you. If you didn't say your daughters will get sustained from the ones who inherit from me, they'll be able to get their sustenance until such time that they get married. If you didn't write it, it's anyway, right? It's anyway a commitment. If you didn't say what we just said before, all the days that you're a widow, you will get mizonot, sustenance, he has to give it. That's how Anshe Yerushalayim were right, and Anshe Galil Kotvim Kanshe Yerushalayim. People in the Galilee, the people in Jerusalem would all write this. But Anshe Yehuda you Kotvim, fascinating. Ad Shirtzu Hayorshim Latet Laktubatech. Different from what I said before. The people in Yehuda would say they were right until the Yorshim decide they no longer want to give you mizonot. They can decide, and then they give you their ketubah. In other words, until they give you their ketubah. When they decide we want to give you your lump sum, that's the end of your mizonot. So therefore, if the Yorshim want, they can do that. Why do I have this line? It's pretty obvious, right? This is the Yorshim in Yehuda. The heirs in Judea can say, we want to give you your ketubah. So some people say, even if it's not written in their ketubahs, anyone who got married in the Judea, since that was the custom, the heirs can basically write her out and basically say, we're giving you your ketubah today, you're not getting payments anymore. So now the Gemara starts off with the statement of Rabbi Yochanan, quoting Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. And what's the reason that they instituted this? They were worried that the men want to leave all their inheritance for their sons and not give their daughters what they needed. So they wanted the fathers to give their daughters serious dowries. And therefore they said, don't worry, it's not like you're going to lose this money. It'll go to your grandsons through her. So but basically this is coming out of the inheritance of the sons. So how could it be that the Torah says the sons inherit, and yet he can basically pass on things to his daughter in this way? In other words, if a man wants to, he can, but this is instituting every single person is basically giving inheritance to their daughters against what the Torah said. They say, no, this is also learned out from the Torah. And interestingly, they bring a pasuk from the Nevi'im and not the Torah. Pasuk from Yirmiyahu. Take wives and have children. And take wives for your sons. And your daughters you should give to men. Your sons you can marry off. That's in your hands. But you can't marry off your daughters. It's not in your control. What we learn from here is you should spend money to dress up your daughters and give them what they need and have them be in a good financial state so that people will want to marry them. And from there, you see that you're allowed to do this even by Torah law. Again, it's not exactly by Torah law, it's from the prophets, but it's a pasuk that proves that they would do this. But ad kama, so now, to what extent are you allowed to do this? How much of your money? So a tenth of his possessions. And this is actually used when the father dies and the sons inherit. How much of the money do they need to give for the woman's dowry? They say up to a tenth of his possessions. Okay, so now we're going to have all sorts of questions about this ketubot benin dichrin. So now they're going to say maybe the father should inherit and the husband. One second. Right. So the Rashi says here, right. What they're saying is then the ketubot benin dichrin, if the ketubot benin dichrin is promising the dowry will go to the sons. So shouldn't it only apply to the father, meaning what the father gives? What the father gave, the ketubah is made up of two things. We talked about this before. There's the dowry that she brings in, and then there's all the money he commits to her. So we already learned before that the ketubah benin dichrin means even the 200 zuz and any tosefet goes to her. So why? Theoretically, that goes to her sons. If she dies first, normally he doesn't have to pay the ketubah. But if he dies, it actually goes to her sons. So why don't we say only the dowry? If the whole thing was to make sure the fathers give good dowries, then just the dowry should go. And the parts of the husband gave to the ketubah shouldn't, the 200 zuz, the extra. To which the Gemara answers, no, because again, it would deter the father from giving anything. If he says, she's not going to get all of it, her sons won't get all of it, I'm not writing anything. Lo lichtov baal. Okay, so now they say maybe in the case where, one second, right? So what if the father doesn't give a dowry, And maybe, right, where it's only where there's a dowry. What if there wasn't a dowry? What if she had no money and he married her anyway and promised her the ketubah? Maybe then the sons don't get the ketubah money. So, lo plug Rabbanan. They didn't distinguish. Bat ben abanim nami tira. So what about a daughter among sons? Maybe she should also inherit. In other words, let's say, right, the ketubah in Dichrin, it only goes to her sons. What if she has no sons and only daughters? They meant it to be like Nachala, like Yerusha, like heirs, which is only sons. Bat ben abanim, that's Bat ben abanim. If there's a daughter, why doesn't it go to her daughters and her sons? And that's because it's like Nachala, where only the sons. Bat ben abanotirot. What about if it's a daughter among other daughters? Right? Why not to the daughters? Lo plug Rabbanan. They didn't distinguish. Okay, since in most of the cases it goes to the boys because she has sons, they didn't distinguish and start making this also for girls. Why don't we allow this to be collected from the metaltalin, from the movable stuff? Ketubot shavia Rabbanan. They made it like a ketubah, which again, by law, again, I told you the Gaonim changed it, but by law, the ketubah can only be collected from land. Titra from Mishabde. Well, then maybe if it's like a ketubah, they should be allowed to collect it from lien property, like the ketubah. Yartuntnan. No, it's more like Yerusha, and Yerusha can't be collected from lien property, inheritance. Ve'ema afagav deleka motar dinar. Maybe this should, now this law is only true if there's at least a dinar of property left. Okay, why is that? It can't totally uproot laws of Nachala. So therefore, this is only going to be true if there's at least a dinar left of land of the fathers that can be divided by the sons. If the only thing that's left is this woman's ketubah, then it doesn't go straight to her sons only. There has to be basic laws of Yerusha. We talked about before that this kind of overrides laws of Yerusha. So there have to be basic laws of Yerusha, and then the sons can get. But if there's not even a dinar left, as long as there's one dinar, that can be split evenly by the brothers, and then all of her ketubah goes to them. But if there's only thing is left is her ketubah money, then that has to be split evenly between all the sons. Okay, the next line starts a story. So we'll leave these three last lines for tomorrow's daf. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and a Chodesh Tov.